So, guess who? Funnily enough, it's Elijah. It's Elijah. Elijah's story is one that's full of bits of story that you would know well, that you know well from Sunday school days if you went to Sunday school. It's the big moments in Elijah's life. And if I asked you to call them out, you could probably do that. You could tell me about the time he was in the desert and fed by the ravens, the time that he called the fire down on the sacrifice, when he collapsed under the broom tree, when he was in the cave. Those are the highlights, aren't they? When he went to heaven in a chariot of fire, horses of fire. Those are the moments that we know and remember of Elijah's life, aren't they? But there are little tiny nuggets that are also in the story of Elijah, and it's one of those that I want to share this morning. It's actually part of a much bigger story. It's part of the story when Elijah is on Mount Carmel with the prophets of Baal, who are the idol worshippers, and they have been spreading idol worship across the land, and they have really distracted the Hebrew nation to take their eyes off of the Lord. And that was probably done through coercion, through fear, through all sorts of ways. But Elijah the prophet had a mission to turn people's eyes back to the Lord. And he went to the king and he pronounced drought. And drought was one of the ways that God reminded the people that you've turned away from me. And they've been at least 3 years into the hardship of drought at this point, in a land that is not unused to drought, but drought for 3 years was quite extraordinary. And then Elijah calls this meeting, and I have no idea how the message went out, but the message went out and the people obeyed. Even the king was there. The queen didn't come, but the king was there. So I'm going to read from 1 Kings 18, verses 25 to 37. Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." That's because he knew that they would have people hiding underneath to light it from below, so it looked like a miracle. It's a bit naughty, isn't it? So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. "Baal, answer us," they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder," he said. "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he's deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he's asleep and must be awakened." So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But I love the Bible when it makes an emphasis. This is triplicate. There was no response, no one answered, no one paid attention. Don't you just love the emphasis there? Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood." "Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it the 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I'm your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so that these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. Quite a sight, isn't it? Must have been quite a sight. So the major part of that story would be well known to you, the calling of the setting up of the sacrifice and the failure of the prophets of Baal for the calling down of fire on their bull, and then Elijah calls down the fire of God on his. But there are a couple of little things in this story that are really important, and I hadn't noticed until I started to look at this man in a lot more detail. At the time of the evening sacrifice, Elijah calls the people to him. They've been up on the mountain probably for hours at this stage. And when he says come, in the original Hebrew, there is a sense of come and worship. It's not just come here and have a look at, see what I'm going to do. Come and worship. I guess they came because they felt they needed to obey the instruction. They were probably hugely relieved that the ordeal of the other guys was over, and so they come to see what Elijah's going to do. And I don't suppose for 1 minute he did what they anticipated. Because what he does first, before he sets up the sacrifice, is he repairs the altar of the Lord. Just that line. He repairs the altar of the Lord, which is in ruins. And this, I think, is hugely significant and is essential in the preparation of what he's then going to ask the Lord to do. Mount Carmel, probably not a random choice for this event, because altars of the Lord dedicated to the Lord before the temple was built were put on the high places, and that's where the people who lived in the area would go and worship and sacrifice. The Day of Atonement, they'd be used to going to the altar of the Lord for that day when they would know that their sins had been taken away. And so as an act of worship, Elijah repairs it, because it's probably been broken down by the prophets of Baal, who went through the land destroying anything that was related to Jehovah, to God. And altars were built in places of remembrance. If you go back through the Old Testament, you can see that people like Abraham built an altar where he encountered God. Noah did, Saul did, David did, Solomon did. They built altars where they had had significant encounters with God. Have you ever done something like taken a stone from a mountain and laid it on the top of a cairn? It's a similar thing. It's an act of kind of, I was here and this is what happened. Have you ever made a note in your journal that I was in worship today and this happened? It is a remembrance of an event that was really special and particular. And that's what these people were doing when they built an altar. It was a place of worship. And we do similar things, perhaps. And as I thought about altars of the Lord, I thought, really, there is one ultimate altar of the Lord. It's the cross. It's the cross. It's the place of sacrifice, the place of encounter, the place where forgiveness can be received and our guilt and shame can be removed. So I wonder if the altars of the Lord in the Old Testament, as we see them written about, are actually kind of prophetic in a way of what was to come. And Elijah was a prophet after all. And so he restored the altar. And to do that, he took 12 stones, representing the 12 tribes of Israel. And he rebuilt the altar using these 12 stones. The unity of the nation had fallen apart under the idol worshippers. And I wonder if the people watching suddenly had a glimpse of what he was doing. I wonder if he named the tribes as he laid them, and the people went, oh yeah, that's who I am. That's where I come from. That's my tribe. And that's really significant, isn't it, I think? So what for you, where for you, is the altar of the Lord in your life? Where's the place of worship? I'm not talking about your church. I'm talking about internally, that place of internal worship and thanksgiving. Can you access that easily? Or is it kind of buried deep somewhere under all that you are going through? I think it's hugely significant that Elijah rebuilt it before he did anything else. He restored the place of worship before he did anything else. And I suppose it's a question for each one today, what is the place of worship like in your life, that internal worship? Is it in good order? Has it been neglected for a bit? Is it well used? I think we should note that the fire of the Lord on the sacrifice didn't fall until after the altar had been rebuilt. And then Elijah prepared the animal on the repaired altar. It feels like an act of devotion to me that Elijah did that. And then he lays out the bull and laid on the altar. And then he did something really mysterious. If you're going to pray for fire, why do you soak it in water first? I don't know if you noticed that, how much water was used, and you might have been wondering, hang on, I thought they were in drought. Where did all that water come from? Mount Carmel is quite near the sea. It is quite likely that it was seawater, so he wasn't throwing away drinking water. But who carried it? Did Elijah? Is that part of his devotion? Was that part of his worship, to carry all that water? Anyway, he douses the altar with water. And I love the commentator F.B. Meyer, who says, few of us have the faith of Elijah, that we are not so sure of God that we put difficulties in his way of answering our prayer. I want to make it easy for him to answer my prayer, don't you? I don't want to make it difficult for him. It's quite challenging, that. Few of us are not so sure of God that we would put difficulties in his way. And then Elijah begins to pray at the time of the evening sacrifice. Why might that be significant? Well, the time of the evening sacrifice was part of the heritage of the worship of these people. It had been lost when the altars had been torn down, when the idol worship spread across the land. But it was the rhythm that had been part of the Hebrew nation for a long time. The time for the evening sacrifice is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Does that strike a chord? For another sacrifice that took place down through the years from Elijah. Elijah would have not known, probably, although he was a prophet, so perhaps he did. Years later, generations later, the evening sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. So by restoring the altar and making the evening sacrifice at the time of the evening sacrifice, Elijah was putting back in place the ancient rhythms of the people. Is there something that God might want to say to you today through that, about putting in place something that has been lost in your life, maybe? And I'm going to close with something about Elijah's prayer. If I was Elijah standing before that altar with a cut-up bull, I would be saying, "Send the fire, Lord." Wouldn't you? Send the fire. Rain your fire down from heaven. Consume all the bits of the bull. Let these people see that you are God. Is that how he prayed? No. He didn't even mention the fire. I'd want to be saying to God, "This is what I want you to do. This is how I want you to do it. Let them see, Lord, that you are God." Elijah doesn't do that. What did he pray? He said, "Let it be known today that you are God." In other words, do it how you like. "I'm your servant. Answer me, Lord, so that these people will know that you are God." He is letting God be sovereign, isn't he, in that prayer, and answering how God chooses to answer. I find that hugely challenging, that in that critical moment, Elijah lets God be sovereign and to answer in the way of God's choosing. Maybe God wants to say something to us through that. So we're going to come to